Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I'm driving a 1987 Yugo GV. Up front is a 1.1 liter inline 4 and down below is a 4-speed manual transmission. Before we get started, the owner Sean has an Instagram and a YouTube channel for this car, Detroit Yugo. I will leave that in the description below. Please go check that out. He has tons of information, tons of videos about the Yugo. So if you want more info, head on over there. Guys, I'm so excited to be driving a Yugo. I mean, look at it. So I'm actually going to give some history of the Yugo before we get into the video. The Yugo gets its name from where it was manufactured in Yugoslavia back in the 80s. This is the Yugo GV, which means great value. What's interesting about this car is that Yugo did not last here in the States for very long. It started out in '86 and it ended in the early 90s because, well, actually, Yugoslavia ended in the early 90s as well. So this car was actually brought over because the government here in the US was trying to make a trade deal with Yugoslavia for oil, but Yugoslavia didn't really have a whole lot to barter with, except for the Yugo. It's manufactured by a company named Zapasta, which is actually an arms manufacturer. They make weapons and also Yugos. But with all of that being said, let's get back to the 1.1 liter inline 4. It's carbureted, it has an electronic choke, and it makes 50 some horsepower from the factory. Let's be honest here, it's not making that now. It's very slow. Like I said, paired to it is a 4-speed manual transmission. Nothing really too crazy. And of course, it's front wheel drive. The Yugo is actually not great to drive. It's not as bad as I thought, but the worst thing about the Yugo is the numbness. I'm not really sure where the clutch grabs. I'm not really sure where the throttle is. I'm not really sure where the gears are with the shifter. Weight-wise, it feels great. It's light, it's nimble, and once you're going, it is a little go-kart, but I just don't like the numbness. That being said, this car is so fun to drive. We'll talk about that later on. I absolutely love driving this thing. But let's talk about the interior. We have very few things to talk about in here. In front of me, I have 2 gauges. On the left is my speedometer with coolant temperature at the bottom right, and then on the right, I have all my warning lights along with my fuel. Very, very basic. You have to remember, this car originally sold for about $4,000 in the US, which is about $8,000 or $9,000 today, which is still super, super cheap. So everything in here is super cheap, and that'll become very apparent. On the steering wheel, I have the Yugo logo, and that's it. That's all. To the left of me, I have light switches, fan switches, defroster, and that's it. On the door, I have a crank. Although, interestingly enough, the door locks. The doors have rotary locks. You sort of twist it, which is cool. But you would think red would mean lock and green would mean unlock. No, 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 no. Green means locked, red means unlocked. Don't know why. In the center, I have 2 very small climate control vents. Then I have my actual climate controls. They are unlabeled. I would assume this is 1, to cut costs, and 2, just so they could sell this car in tons of different markets and they wouldn't have to translate anything. They just sell in a different market and say, figure it out in whatever language you speak. Down below that, I of course have an aftermarket radio. This is not the factory Yugo radio. They were not balling in the 80s quite like this. Then I have dealer installed air conditioning. Not every Yugo got these 2 vents with the air conditioning settings, but this particular Yugo does, which is absolutely amazing. I love that. Then we have the shifter itself. Like I said, the shifter feels very vague and it looks cheap. It looks like something you would put into a car that you have to make tons of for very little money. Then I have my handbrake down below. And now the seats are very, very comfortable, and actually the whole space inside of here. The Yugo is actually very, very spacious for what it is. My left leg, I could ballroom dance with my left leg. That's how much room I have. I was really, really impressed with just the room and the visibility here in the Yugo. But speaking of seats, we do have back seats. So let's do a back seat review. So we're in the back of the 87 Yugo, and I have tons of room back here. First of all, I have ashtrays on either side. Love that. But this is roomier than a 2020 BMW M2. This is roomier than a Lotus Evora. This is roomier than a lot of actually back seats that I've been in recently. I would say this is roomier than a 2020 Corolla, which is saying a lot. the cabin in the Yugo is so spacious. I mean, for what it is, it's tiny. It's a tiny car, but they really maximize the space, which I really, really like. Like I said, 2 ashtrays back here, grab handles, and that's all I get. I can tilt out these windows. These windows are already tilted out. That's it. That's all I can do. Not a lot of amenities back here, but definitely a lot of space. And so, fit a family in here. You know, all 4 of you, if this is your only vehicle you could have afforded, you're taking this to the store, you're taking this to school, you're taking this everywhere. Really, really neat. Now we gotta talk about the looks. I love the looks of the Yugo, but I have to point out something. That hood scoop on the hood is not for the engine. That is not for the engine at all. That scoop on the hood is for the cabin air. So that's an air intake for the occupants, not the engine. This does not have a turbo. This is not a functional hood scoop for the engine. This is just for the cabin. I could not believe that when the owner told me that. That's so cool. But I mean, look at it. It's so unapologetically Eastern European. Everything on the car is there because that's the cheapest spot and the most utilitarian spot to put something. That's it. There's no style, there's no glamour, there's no rhyme or reason other than the fact that it works. And I love that about this car, and that's my final thoughts on the Yugo. No, it's not great to drive. All the controls are very numb, and of course, this being a very rare car, I'm quite scared to break it or do anything to it. But what you have to understand is that this car gave transportation to people that previously didn't have transportation. Here in America, there's like 2 cars for every person. It's not that different. But over in Europe, this gave someone the transportation they never had. They didn't have to rely on the bus anymore to get to work. This is a communist vehicle. You get in this and it works. Everything has a purpose. There is no fluff. There is no vanity. There is no beauty to this car. The only beauty that I really see in this car is brutalism. If you guys have ever looked up the architecture brutalism, if you haven't, I'd highly suggest it. It's concrete and harsh angles and things like that, but there's this almost sort of beauty in this doom-looking architecture. That's how I feel about the Yugo, is that it's so utilitarian. Everything's here because it works. I also think it's kind of a metaphor that we're filming this review in an abandoned Kmart. 2 monikers that don't really exist anymore. The Yugo and Kmart. And so it was brought over here as a deal with the government, really, for oil. And they sold all right, but when was the last time you saw a Yugo? For me, I hadn't seen one until today. And so now there's something really, really special. And that's why I love driving it. Because everyone stares at you. No one knows what it is. Everyone thinks it's like an old Golf or a Rabbit or something of the sort, or an old Fiesta. No, I'm driving a Yugo. And so at the end of the day, in the last month, I've driven a Mark V Supra. But this is the car that I'm going to talk about at dinner. This is the car that I'm going to brag about at my next friend gathering. Yugo, man. There's just something about him. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Sean for letting me take out his Yugo. Seriously, I can't thank Sean enough for letting me take this car out. This is such a unique experience that I might never get again. This gives me such a glimpse into what transportation was in Eastern Europe, in communist countries back in the 80s. Yeah, Germany was sending us BMW E30s, but Yugoslavia, Croatia, Bosnia, this is what they were driving. And that's so cool to me. This is a piece of history. I love it. So huge thank you to Sean for letting me film his Yugo. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.